Our story begins in the 1950s. That's when a boy on an Italian vacation with his family brought home as many as 10 common European wall lizards to his home in Cincinnati, Ohio. He released them into his backyard, and over the years, the population in the Cincinnati area exploded. The lizards have now made their way to Columbus, specifically Columbus Downtown High School's parking lot. The issue here? As an invasive species, they could disrupt the ecosystem in Ohio and could have a negative impact on native wildlife. With that happening outside, students inside the school jumped at the opportunity to catch and study these lizards, working with Ohio Wesleyan University, the Ohio State University, and the Ohio Division of Wildlife. Mr. Hitoski's junior and senior environmental science classes are taking on the project. They were trained by OSU's Greg Lips and OWU's Eric Gangloff to master capturing techniques and handling practices.
This is a unique opportunity. Very rarely do we catch an invasive species before it spreads far out. You know, once it spreads throughout the city of Columbus, we won't be able to do anything about it. But here it's just in one little location. So it gives us an opportunity to try to capture them all and keep them from spreading throughout Columbus and further. And what we've done is we've removed all the vegetation from around the parking lot. And the lizards were very hard to capture when there was all that vegetation. They could hide down in it. So now it's barren. But we've given them ceramic tiles, laid those out all over through here to give some artificial cover, a place for the lizards to hide, and that's actually what they like. They like rock more than they like vegetation to hide in. So we're gonna keep doing this and keep checking over and over again until we're certain that we don't have any lizards remaining here. And if we accomplish that, it'll be one of the very few examples we have of successfully eradicating an invasive species before it takes hold.
I ain't gonna lie, I was like, you know, lizards, you know, they're part of the way, but then I, you know, discovered there was like rare lizards. I was like, oh, okay, this might be something that we may be able to do, just to learn, you know, more about lizards in general.
And as you're walking along, sort of thinking like a lizard, looking at any places where like the sun comes through and makes a nice like bright spot, or even in some of the leaf litter here, would be a good spot for them to go if they weren't necessarily, if the tiles weren't warm enough yet, or if they just hadn't chosen to go under one.
Quickly into their first search, lizards were spotted in their preferred habitat, cracks in the walls.
Dude,
Where? You're lying.
oh, look at it from where? Did you get one?
Right there. Oh, look, this is what is it?
They of course love the crevices between the bricks or any cracks in any walls or foundation. It gives them a nice tight space to feel comfortable, to stay warm, to avoid elements or predators. The more of those places that we can remove on these sites, not only put the lizards a bit more out in the open where we can catch them and move them, but take away places where they could hibernate and overwinter.
Good evening, everyone. I am calling our March 21st business meeting to order. Please call the roll.
President Adair?
Present.
Ms. Beckley?
Excused.
Mr. Brown?
I'm here. Present.
Dr. Perry?
Present.
Ms. Reyes? Here. Vice President Barrett?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Will you all please stand and join me as the colors are presented by our South High School ROTC.
March on. March. Left turn. March. Color guard. Hold. Present. Arms.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Thank our junior ROTC. They had a long day of practice, school, and they continue to do a great job. Also want to congratulate them on ranking third in their recent academic competition. We are so proud of them. Excellent work with this program. Congratulations to all the cadets and the advisors of that program. Okay, our treasurer is not here, so the first item on our agenda is to appoint our treasurer pro temp. I will make a motion that Vice President Christina Vera become our treasurer pro temp for this meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
There's been a second. Please call the roll.
President Adair?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
Vice President Vera?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And I forgot to mention, I thought it was assumed, but we are here at South High School today. This is, since before COVID, our first time back in the community. So I want to thank everyone here at South for being very welcoming. We had our first open office hours this evening as well. I want to thank everyone who helped prepare that. This is obviously such a welcoming community, and we are so grateful. This is something the board is going to be doing our next month, the last meeting, this last Tuesday. We will be at West High School, and in May, we are going to go up to the northeast corner and we will be at Mifflin. So we look forward to seeing you out in our community. This is an effort to make sure that we are engaging our community in a way that's more accessible to all of you. So please come out and join us when we come to visit your region. Okay, so board members, on our agenda this evening, we have one speaker here for agenda item. We are expecting a report from our superintendent. We have no report from the internal auditor's office. We have a report from our treasurer's office. We have several items on board matters. We have our consent agenda. We do not have public comment on non-agenda items, and we do not have an executive session this evening. We will finish up with adjournment. Is there a motion to approve our agenda?
Motion to
So
approve the
moved.
agenda.
There's been a motion by Cole, second by Pierce. Are there any changes or additions? Hearing none, hearing no objection, our agenda has now been adopted. So we are going to go ahead and start with public comment on agenda items. We have one speaker. We have President Nana Watson from the NAACP. Topic, search firm and law firm for superintendent and the costs associated with them. Board action requested, give a breakdown of costs for the search. Good evening, President Watson. You have 3 minutes to address the board. You may begin when you're ready.
Thank you so much, President Adair, members of the board, and Interim Superintendent Chapman. Thank you so much for responding to the NAACP's questions. Your responses, however, raise some serious concerns regarding the responsible use of funds, or shall I say taxpayer dollars. In regards to the search for a new superintendent, the engagement of a law firm at the tune of $250,000, alongside the procurement dollars, which amount hasn't been stipulated, to engage a search firm and a crisis communication agency are quite excessive. Needless to say, these expenses are coupled with the continued payment outlay of salaries and benefits for the former and interim superintendents. Superintendent, these allocated procurement dollars are quite excessive, wouldn't you say? If I'm in error with my assessment of the expenses, I stand corrected upon the submission of the calculated breakdown, indicating otherwise. These expenses question the rationale allocation of resources. For an example, there are school buildings in need of desperate repairs. Certainly, the responsible spend of tax dollars would negate discussions regarding a funding level to cover expenses. Notwithstanding that, there is considerable ambiguity regarding Dr. Dixon's role at this time. As relates to the former superintendent, your response relevant to her duties were, she was working virtually and assisting Dr. Chapman. You all know what you continue to tell me week after week. We have contacted those entities, and they're not clear, on what she's doing. I contacted the superintendent's office last week to speak with her. I was informed that Dr. Dixon was at a convention last week. We requested a meeting when she returns. Needless to say, we have not been contacted and are still waiting on those responses. In addition, public records request was made to the district, requesting emails that you, the board, have sent to the former superintendent and emails to you, much to our chagrin. There were no responses that emails have been sent. That's shameful. I just want to end, because I have so much to say and time is running out. It's not my friend. I tell you what, to prevent our continuance of asking questions to this forum on behalf of the NAACP, we are extending an invitation for you to attend an NAACP Executive Committee meeting so we can better understand your thought process and decision-making relating to all of the questions we have asked thus far. Thank you. Looking forward to hearing from you, and hopefully you will attend NAACP meeting at some point.
Thank you, President Watson, for those comments and the invitation. We appreciate your advocacy. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on in our agenda to item 5, the superintendent's report. To turn it over to Dr. Chapman.
Good afternoon, or good evening, President Adair, Vice President Vera, members of the board. At this time, we are going to transition to our highlight video, which shares all of the highlights from the last time that we met, that we would like to acknowledge the work of our team members across the district, the work that they have been supporting since our last meeting.
Hello, and welcome to this week's report from your interim superintendent. First off, I want to congratulate the Columbus Afrocentric Early College Lady Nubians who brought the state title back to Columbus. The Lady Nubians defeated Doylestown Chippewa 75-62 in the Division III state championship game. The Lady Nubians have now won 15 City League championships and 17 district titles. This marks the school's 8th girls basketball state title, tying with Cincinnati Mount Notre Dame for the most OHSAA state title in girls basketball. Congratulations to the Lady Nubians. I also want to recognize the Afrocentric Nubians who made it to the Final Four and played an excellent game which went into double overtime. The Nubians were not able to pull off a victory, but we are so proud of our Columbus City Schools student athletes and all that they do on and off the court. Over the weekend, CCS and community partners hosted the first ever EduHealth mobile community event at La Plaza Tapatia. District staff and community partners provided many services, including academic support, health screenings, immunizations, and employment resources. At our first event, we helped more than 130 people. The EduHealth Caravan series will continue to travel to more locations across Columbus. Through these events, we hope to help families improve their health and well-being by providing more equitable access to resources. Thank you to our partners at Nationwide Children's Hospital, Primary One Health, and Spectrum News for making this possible. Becoming financially literate is an important life skill that will carry on throughout students' lives. Last week, Columbus Downtown High School students saw this firsthand at a national financial education competition. Students participated in the Capitol Hill Challenge, a special edition of the stock market game offered each spring. The program pairs congressional members with students, teachers, and schools in their respective congressional districts. Ohio Congresswoman Joyce Beatty made a special appearance at the school and talked with students about financial education and answered questions. We were honored to have Congresswoman Beatty visit our school and meet our amazing students. Last week, students also got the chance to explore STEM career fields as part of the inaugural Middle School STEM Days event at Starling. The project encouraged middle schoolers to explore STEM careers, including biomedical technologies, forensics, and engineering. This event was hosted in collaboration with the Office of Congresswoman Joyce Beatty and the PASS Foundation. There are a few events coming up that you won't want to miss. Coming up on Saturday, March 25th, is the Summer Opportunities and Engagement Fair. Students and families will learn about the many different summer programs, camps, internships, volunteer hours, and employment opportunities for students in grades pre-K through 12. The event will take place from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Columbus Metropolitan Library main branch. Additionally, the Transition Fair is coming up on April 4th. Here, students ages 14 and older and their families will learn more about the transition from high school to adulthood. This event will take place from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Fort Hays Career Center, Construction Arts and Technology Building. As a reminder, registration for the CCS Summer Experience is now open. This year's summer experience is back with all the unique learning opportunities families have come to expect and some new experiences as well. The program is free and open to all pre-K through 12th grade Columbus City School students. Families can register now through the parent portal. This has been the Interim Superintendent's Report for March 21st. Thank you for joining me. Now we will hear from two of our superintendent student ambassadors, South High School 10th grade students, Anthony Miller and Micaiah McMurtry, will present an overview of their school, highlighting their great programs and much more. The Superintendent Student Ambassador Program gives students career and leadership opportunities. Students act as liaisons to their high school and the superintendent's office. The program helps set a strong foundation for success in school, work, and life. And now I'll turn it over to Anthony and Micaiah.
To the board members, Dr. Chapman, community members, and families, I am Micaiah McMurtry, and this is Anthony Miller. We would like to welcome you to the March 21st Columbus City Schools Board meeting at South High School.
We are ambassadors who serve on the Superintendent's Council, Student Council members, and proud South High School sophomores. We have a short presentation for you tonight, starting with a video about the history of South, past and present.
South High School opened in 1900 at 345 East Eschler Avenue. By 1920, the school had outgrown the building, and construction began on a new location at 1160 Ann Street. That beautiful brick house has been our home for the past 99 years. South High School distinguished alumni goes from the brick house to the White House. It includes United States Air Force General and Chief of Staff Curtis LeMay, legendary Hollywood composer Artie Kane, former Columbus Mayor Tom Moody, and beloved local news personality Angela Pace. Distinguished South Athletic alumni includes Major League Rookie of the Year and World Series champion Frank Howard, Buffalo Bills legend and Ring of Honor honoree Elbert Dubenion, and NFL veteran and 1988 Comeback Player of the Year Greg Bell. Principal Christy Nickerson and her administration preside over one of the most unique academic programs in the city, offering not only honors and college credit plus, but fine and digital arts programs, including a music and technology class where students learn to create music and podcasts. Sergeant Zumach and Colonel Allman lead one of the most decorated ROTC programs in the country. The South staff includes 6 former or current Coach of the Year award winners, including Will and Kathy James, Patrick Bowling, Charlotte Kiesler, 8-time Coach of the Year Ramon Spears, and reigning City Bowling and State Football Coach of the Year George W. Yates II. South is the reigning city champion in girls bowling and the reigning city champion in football. Tradition is not worshiping the ashes, it's tending to the flame. On Ann Street, our flame is a raging inferno. We are South.
Our school goals include a focus on improving school culture and increasing student voice. Our student council sponsored a canned food drive and basket giveaway for Thanksgiving to help families in need. To demonstrate creativity, we held a school-wide celebration for Black History Month. Staff and students decorated doors and bulletin boards with significant achievements by African Americans.
Our creativity shines bright in our newly formed drama club, who presented A Midsummer's Night Dream this past Friday right here in the South High School auditorium. For Relationship Week, we communicated kindness with daily activities to show our concern for each other. We even posted notes on support on over 900 lockers and doors to spread kindness.
We communicate our admiration for the strong women in our lives with the school-wide letter writing campaign and creation of collages for the women who inspire us. Technology is alive at South High School, with our music tech students creating podcasts and music, while our graphic arts students use our new Mac labs creating amazing arts.
As our school district implemented new safety protocols to keep our schools safe, our students adapted quickly, and we have seen a dramatic decrease in weapons coming in our building. Our critical thinking is evident when we hold our first annual Student Leadership Summit in May. Over 50 students will be trained in conflict resolution, restorative practice, community service projects, and school culture.
This concludes our presentation. Thank you, board members and Dr. Chapman, for this amazing opportunity to share the great things happening at South High School.
Thank you, Anthony and Micaiah, for your presentation and also your service on the Superintendent Student Ambassador Program throughout the school year. We appreciate you. President Adair, this concludes my first report, and if I may, I'll transition to the second report. The second report that I have this evening is the fiscal year 24 General Fund Budget presentation. This presentation tonight is an overview, will provide an overview of all of the considerations that we have considered as we have formalized the FY24 budget. We will be discussing the process as a whole. We'll discuss the calendar and a sample of major spend areas that are aligned to our strategic plan and the priorities in our strategic plan. We'll also provide a personnel budget update and then close out with just a summary slide on our budget totals. A few considerations before we get into the presentation. I would like to share that this is our first pass at aligning our budgets to the strategic priorities. And so if you recall, in years past, when the budget was presented, it was presented by department. And so there would essentially be 10 leaders that would come to the podium, each representing their respective budgets. And so we have shifted that practice. This is our first attempt to shift that practice to show a more aligned and coherent presentation of how our resources are supporting our strategies that are aligned in that are identified in our strategic plan. I would like to note that this presentation is only about the FY24 general fund budget. We certainly have other resource streams in terms of grant funding, ESSER funding, and this presentation only speaks to the FY24 general fund budget. This presentation includes reductions from the departmental non-personnel budgets. Want you all to also know that we are not cutting any of our school budgets, and we are still waiting for final information and confirmation regarding the state funding formula, which may again cause us to revisit this budget and make shifts or adjustments. Again, we want you to know that we will continue to focus on continuous improvement, and this budget alignment that you're seeing here tonight is an effort and a first step in that direction. We'll continue to talk about the process. So the budget process, again, we have worked very diligently to align our budget to the strategic priorities. We have worked to break down budget silos so that all of our department leaders and budget managers are working together to make sure that these investments are aligned to our strategic priorities. The budget team has certainly worked with all of our departments to provide increased budget office support. So in some cases, these are one-on-one meetings where they're sitting down with the department leaders and talking through the budget process and making sure that they have the support that they need to make informed decisions. Our budget calendar. So this calendar really just outlines the entire process. Again, these conversations began last year, and this is the culmination of several conversations, an entire process district-wide where we have been working on developing the budget and finalizing these decisions. Before we talk about the actual investments or areas of investment by priority, we want to just kind of take a look and pause at our student enrollment data. As you all know, that funding is certainly tied to enrollment, and as you can see, our enrollment is not what it used to be in 2013, but right now for 2022 and 2023, and the next couple of years, our enrollment is projected to be fairly stable at about 45,000 students. And so our entire budget that we will be discussing with you this evening certainly reflects some decreases from FY23. These decreases are only in departmental budgets and not non-personnel budgets, not personnel. This request to make decreases is a response to the Treasurer's request to the team to reduce non-personnel department budgets by 30% for the upcoming school year, FY24. Each department then reviewed current spend and anticipated need aligned to the strategic priorities. Each team member identified appropriate non-personnel reductions, and then we came together and as a team collectively we were able to reduce about 14% of the budget. I want to name that we did not meet the budget reduction goal of 30%. So the Treasurer's Office said, we need you to look at the budget, make cuts or reductions to the tune of 30% for non-personnel, and the team really leaned in. We had some very difficult conversations, and this is where we landed. We were able to make reductions totaling 14%. Again, we have identified strategies that could not go unfunded. So this slide shows all of our expenditures for the entire budget, entire district budget that are aligned to our strategic priorities. And so if you look at the personnel budget, and if you look, you can see how much our resources are aligned to each of our strategic priorities. Whole child focus, equitable opportunities for all, stronger learning communities, authentic engagement, and foundational systems of support. We will talk in greater detail about each one of these priority areas and the major spend areas for each one of these, and for the non-personnel budget for tonight. But I just want you to see overall the bigger picture of how our budget is comprised of our personnel budget and our non-personnel budget, which equals the total budget for the organization. And again, I want to name that this is our first pass as an organization for aligning our budget to our strategic priorities that are outlined in our strategic plan. So priority number one. Priority number one is our whole child focus. As you know, this priority area really speaks to the design and implementation of curriculum with a holistic approach so that students find their education more relevant, rewarding, and rigorous. The total budget for whole child support is 19%. That includes personnel and non-personnel. But tonight, we're gonna talk about the non-personnel resources, the major spend areas for priority one, whole child focus. And those areas are textbooks, Tier 2 literacy interventions, and literacy professional development. When we think about textbooks, as you know, our district is on a regular textbook adoption cycle, and so the resources that are allocated for next year will include investments in ELA, secondary adoption renewals, College Credit Plus, gifted, honors, and AP textbook resources. These resources offer us print as well as digital resources for our students and for our staff. The Tier 2 literacy interventions, this speaks to Foundations, which is a K-3 early literacy resource that we're using in all of our elementary schools. Also, our Title I teachers and special ed teachers also use this resource as well. And you'll hear more about Foundations shortly in another presentation that we have tonight as we are monitoring our early literacy goal and spending more time talking about our interim goal for second grade literacy. And then the third area here is literacy professional development, and this includes supplies, materials to support professional development, including instruction and materials, and additional support for the implementation of the science of reading. Priority number two, equitable opportunities for all. As you know, priority number two speaks to our efforts to ensure equitable outcomes for all students and employees in order to create communities that promote excellence, personal and professional growth, and a culture of belonging. And again, this 29% of our budget, personnel and non-personnel, supports this strategic priority. The major spend areas in priority number two, the biggest investment is in technology. This is the expansion of broadband, phone, and connectivity services, also pupil transportation for our most vulnerable youth, and the Panorama Survey. This is the survey that's administered 3 times a year to parents, students, and staff. The transportation for our most vulnerable youth, certainly this is a requirement that we provide transportation to our most vulnerable youth. It's a legally required budget investment under McKinney-Vento. Priority number two, equitable opportunities for all. On the first slide, I talked about the investments that we are making internally, so how we're using the resources internally. And then priority number two, the second slide, these are actually allocations that are actually going out. So these are tuition facility payments. As you know, tuition is an amount of money paid to a school district to offset the district's cost of educating a student who is a legal resident of another school district. So the tuition replaces the local tax dollars a school district receives to educate students who reside in that district. The Ohio Department of Education annually sets the tuition amount for each school district, and so these are the costs that we incur related to that requirement. Priority number 3 is strong learning communities in every region. This priority area really pushes us to think about how we strengthen a high-quality, interdependent set of learning communities so that within and among these centers of growth are reliable sources of support, identity, and hope. And this area speaks to some of our contracted services and tuition payments for students in College Credit Plus. So this speaks to our partnerships with I Know I Can, Communities in Schools, and City Year, and tuition payments for students in College Credit Plus. And board members, you do have a separate handout that I believe is maybe 3 pages long that includes some artifacts and data on the investments with these 3 partners to date. Priority number 4, authentic engagement, speaks to our work around actively engaging all stakeholders to ensure that every experience with the district engenders mutual trust, develops quality relationships, and strengthens collective support for the benefit of our students. The major spend areas here are IEP meeting translation services. This ensures that every family with ESL needs is able to robustly engage in IEP meetings. The total number of families served is about 1,300, and we have several vendors that we work with to provide these supports. The building and district family engagement, some examples include our back-to-school resource fair that we had in the summer, the Summer Opportunities Engagement Fair that will be happening next Saturday. This also includes the multiple family ambassador events that happen at our schools, over 100 events each month. And then the family communication tools, this helps us with our ability to push out messaging to all of our stakeholders, over 45,000 students, 9,000 employees, with the push of one button, so they can receive text messages, email message, or phone calls. These would be our robocalls that everyone should be receiving on a regular basis. Foundational systems of support. This is our last priority area, but this actually speaks to really providing all of the key supports when it speaks to operations, business and operations team that they provide to our schools and our district to provide a foundation of support that enables the organization to produce its targeted student outcomes. And so the major spend areas here are utilities for electric, water, sewage, gas. I believe that the gas expenditure is probably the highest one in that category. Auditors' fees, bank fees, and the day-to-day maintenance in buildings and grounds. I just want to note that the day-to-day maintenance for buildings and grounds, this really speaks to fixing and repairing the day-to-day maintenance. So if a door is broken, replacing light bulbs, replacing fixtures, this does not speak to the bigger investments like replacing an HVAC system. And the next slide really speaks to just the personnel budget update. There's no changes to our personnel budget. We are continuing to work within the approved 5-year staffing plan, so there are no additional positions that will be added to the general fund. And closing out, this is the slide where we began the conversation, where we're showing that this is our strategic priority focused budget. So it shows the allocations for each of the priority areas for the personnel budget, non-personnel, and the total budget overall. We want you all to know that utilizing ESSER funding, we are now working with ERS, which is Education Resource Strategies, to design a more transparent and equitable school resourcing and staffing model Align to board guardrail number 3, align resources equitably. This model will tie in all funding types, not just general fund. Remember, we mentioned we have other funding sources, revenues such as title funding, school improvement funding, ESSER funding that was not mentioned in this presentation. And so we just want to reiterate that moving forward, alignment to all fund types, to strategic priorities, board goals, and board guardrails. That is the work of the team, and that is what we'll be focusing on. So this concludes the budget presentation for FY24. Thank you. I'll entertain any questions if you have questions.
Okay, we're gonna, before we do questions, run over to Board Member Cole, who's chair of the Finance Committee, to provide some comments, and then we will open it to board members for questions. First, Dr. Pierce.
Thank you, Madam President. My comments will be short. I really appreciate having the opportunity to kind of done some previous work along with yourself in preparing this presentation and having us think a lot more strategically about how we have to plan post-2024. Right. This document is just one of those evidences of how we have to think beyond the ESSER shortfall that's coming as of next year. Yeah. In addition to that, how we think about the return on investments of vendors that are working directly with us, that we don't have or maintain a transactional relationship with our community partners, but one where we are leveraging each other's power and voice and understanding what our return and our on investment are and what our outcomes are on the impacts of children in the classroom. So I think that this budget is a very good start in helping us think through that, and I look forward to any questions that may come that I can answer as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Start with Dr. Pierce.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I echo my colleague, Board Member Cole's responses as well, and you being able to provide this context for our spending. I would be interested in future budget reports, including just how often our partners do substantial fundraising to actually provide the services for our students. So when we look at I Know I Can, Communities in Schools, City Year, they do a substantial amount of fundraising to actually meet the true needs of our students when it comes to the services that they provide. So the more that our community understands that and can lean into that fundraising and those efforts, I think it will help all of our students.
Thank you, Board Member Pierce. And on that note, I am aware that I do not have that information for all of the partners. That's certainly something that we can ask for. But I am aware that I Know I Can has helped to raise $4.5 million of the $9.5 million goal to launch the new Columbus Promise Initiative. And in addition to that, I Know I Can, as you know, award scholarships to our seniors, and that's another investment that they make every year for the past over 30 years. Absolutely. That they have invested in our students.
Are there any other questions? I just want to say thank you to the Treasurer's Office and the Superintendent's team and everyone that works on these budgets. This was a new way of doing it, and I think that as we continue to do it, it will improve. We will learn and grow through this process, and I think it demonstrates to the community how we are accomplishing our goals and showing a transparent use of money in a way that's really ensuring our student outcomes for our students. So thank you, because this was new, different, hard, and I personally like where it's going. So I just wanted to say that.
And I would just like to thank President Adair, Board Member Cole as the chair of FAC, and our Treasurer's Office, our treasurer, for engaging in lots of dialogue and giving us lots of feedback along the way. It is a shift, it is a change for our organization, but certainly I think it's where we need to be going and the direction we need to be heading in. So thank you for the feedback along the way. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the first part of the report or any comments? We didn't get a chance to comment whether student ambassadors were still here, but if any board members would like to comment or ask questions about the executive report? Dr. Fair.
So in general, I think it was really great to hear our students' voice. I commend our board for moving our meetings into our buildings and giving our community members an opportunity to come into our schools, to see our facilities in the office hours earlier, to have the opportunity to have direct dialogue with us. To the students who brought us specific remarks today, they did an absolutely excellent job. I love the attire. The letter sweaters. I want to see all of our students with that. I know Beechcroft has them, but I want to see all of our students in that type of attire. So it was a really great opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you for those comments. I don't see any other comments, so we're going to go ahead and move on. Thank you, Dr. Chapman, for your reports. We do not have a report from our internal auditor, so we're going to go ahead and turn it to our treasurer's office. We have our deputy treasurer, Jenny, who's here today. Hi.
Hopefully, can you hear me better now? The mic was way high and I didn't even pay any attention. I have a brief presentation, nothing too involved, but I wanted to give the board an update on our professional development plan for this year. We took a more proactive approach this year. Stan, for the first year ever, had an all-staff meeting in August. We provided some brief trainings at that all-staff meeting. We had a presentation about generational differences. We have a vast array of ages in our department, ranging from mid-20s to, actually, I think we have a staff member in her 80s. So quite a wide array of ages, so the generational differences was very appropriate and I think very well received. Then we provided a few little, like I did a brief overview on USAS coding, which gets everybody excited who doesn't want to learn all about accounting, and just some procedural things and an introduction to my department, which was the finance process improvement department, since that was fairly new. And again, this is all kind of stemming from the reorganization, trying to bring the team together as a whole. Following this all-staff meeting, we had a survey that we sent out to staff asking for suggestions and ideas for professional development going through the course of the year, because historically we have not necessarily provided dedicated professional development. We've obviously always supported letting staff members go to any professional development that was appropriate, but this was a more focused, intentional effort. So within the survey, we asked a variety of things, what types of methods of training, whether you wanted in person, virtual, online, those types of things, how often, monthly, quarterly, those types, as well as we asked what career goals some of our staff had to try to make sure that we were addressing those needs as well. The top 5 requests that came out of that survey included specific requests for training, which is a little bit more of a challenge when you're talking the entire department. So those needs were typically met through Paystays, which is a resource that we have available through Tyler Technologies, which is our ERP system. And let's see here. Go back one. If my thing works, which it may not, is not current. Anyway. The second highest request for training was regarding communication. Third was Microsoft Office, various options, Word, Excel. Let's see, it's going the wrong way. There we go. Okay, Microsoft Office, again, that being something that's, again, more difficult with a large group because of the fact that you have a variety of levels of understanding and knowledge as it relates to those topics, so we've tried to address those on a more one-on-one basis. And then the last 2 of the top 5 suggestions or requested topics was leadership and stress management. So based on that information, we moved forward with a plan for the PD, which was, we essentially looked at the dates that were already established by the calendar for the district, and we chose 3 of those dates. We were trying to make sure that we accommodated the needs within the department. Tried not to do it on a processing week for payroll, those types of things to make sure that we could get as many staff members to attend as possible. And then we essentially broke the staff into 3 groups. And within each group, we made sure we had a cross-section across various departments. So we had AP staff, we had AR staff, budget staff, payroll staff, area treasurers, as well as administrators, so that each group had a nice cross-section of the department as a whole, and it gave people an opportunity to meet staff that they don't necessarily interact with on a regular basis. So, as well as give people some faces to put with names, because there are times that, especially with our area treasurers that are located out in the buildings, they have a lot of conversations and emails with people, but they don't necessarily have faces to go with that. And we have a lot of new staff within the last few years. So, and then with each training session, we broke each day into 3, anywhere from 1.5 hours to, I think, 1 hour and 45 minutes was our longest session. But we broke them into 3 even sessions throughout the day, and each group rotated through each session. So everybody got all 3 sessions. We just rotated them through. Gotta keep my phone up here. Okay, so this is the problem. My phone goes to sleep, and then my app doesn't work. So with the topics that we covered, again, a lot of this was driven by the survey that we put out at the beginning. Communication, conflict management, and collaboration. We had an agreement with a vendor, which was Nyla Jean Daniels and Steve Shirgalis. It's a hard name to say. Former superintendent and business manager out of Cleveland Heights, University Heights, that are now certified presenters. I think what the name of the company is, but they did a session about these 3 topics, and it built on itself through each of the 3 dates. So everybody saw Nyla Jean and Steve at each of the 3 days. The presentation skills, our own Dr. Roush and Katie Johnson presented to the group about presentation skills. We had stress management and self-care. We partnered with Pia Fitzgerald through our wellness team. If you've seen some of the Wellness Wednesday things, I believe she's done several of those. She's a very energetic presenter that got a lot of good responses from the staff. We also brought in, I'm trying to think what his name was, Steve Edwards, I believe was his name, that did a DISC assessment. I know there have been a lot of, I know the board did a DISC assessment. I believe Cabinet did a DISC assessment. We've read a book that's tied to DISC assessment in the Treasurer's Office, so it was kind of nice to just be able to tie all of that information in together. And then we also brought in a representative from SERS. All of our staff are contributing members to SERS, so it was to try to get them as much information as they could get to help them better understand their benefits and their retirement options. That one was very well received. Everybody really liked that. And Cam did an excellent job on his presentation. And then in our last training on the 18th of February, I believe it was, we had Chris Liebtag, who did some work with us on the opportunity study that Stan did several years back. And he essentially did a white belt Lean Six Sigma training. So we now have 39 white belts in our treasurer's office. So these were the various topics that we went through to try to, again, expand the information, the understanding, and the needs of our staff. We did put out a survey after each training, and we provided or asked individual questions, which were then shared with each of the presenters about each individual session, but also as the day as a whole. And as you can see, overwhelmingly, the response was very positive. We typically received above 50% responses on our surveys, so I feel like it's fairly indicative of the staff that we had attend. I mean, we had some dates where the attendance was a little off. The last date that we had was a Friday of a pay day. So some of the payroll staff made sure to attend the Lean Six Sigma training, but they didn't always make the other 2 sessions. So the staff survey information was typically pretty positive and very well received. And we also, in the last one, asked for volunteers to serve on a PD committee for the coming year. So we have for next year, we have a professional development committee. Again, cross-section from each staff. So we have some OPSI members, we have some admin members at varying levels. Terry, Addison, and Eric will be co-facilitating that group. We will have them reviewing and determining how many professional development days they feel is appropriate. what dates make sense. They may not necessarily align with the predetermined dates that are set for building staff, because again, payroll needs in terms of processing weeks and paydays don't always align with those pre-scheduled dates. So we may have to use a date that's more accommodating to our staff to get better participation. Again, talk through the length of training and the various topics to continue to provide what things they like, what they want to see more of, how we want to go through that. So that is where we have gone for the committee for the coming year. And again, just kind of wrap it up, why we feel this is important. I mean, it's to essentially help improve our staff. The goal is to increase the customer service to the community, to the staff, to the students, increase staff knowledge, keep staff morale up and moving, give people a career path, and give them the options and the resources they need if they choose and want to advance, and obviously just to do our jobs as well as possible. So that's all I have to report on our PD plan for this year and for the coming school year.
Thank you. I see there's a question. Board Member Cole.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a quick question, Madam Treasurer. Can you tell how these experiences, this professional development, has enhanced your knowledge of the team, a sense of your ability to lead the team? Can you talk just a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's been very interesting, especially with the cross-section and getting to meet other people, especially given the majority of these trainings were focused in areas of communication, collaboration, just understanding each other. The DISC assessment was very insightful because, as we all know, we all think and learn and respond differently to different things. So it was very helpful just personally to be able to know how better to interact with certain people. I think it gave the staff the insight of how maybe better to approach things with certain people. Maybe they've been trying to break through on a topic with somebody, and that's been a challenge. So I think it's been very well received, and it was very interesting. A lot of people gave a lot of good feedback regarding that. So I think a lot of times we get very focused on the day-to-day processing, and the details of, oh, well, this is how I post a receipt, and this is how I process a budget transfer. It was kind of nice to be able to talk with staff in a more introspective way to better understand how we all think and go from there. So
great self-evaluation. Thank you.
Vice President Vera.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenny, for providing this update. I just want to commend your team and your department for being so intentional about your PD, and I really appreciated the fact that you were even looking at experts within the district to be able to facilitate, which I think is extremely important, as we have so many amazing experts in our district. And I would definitely encourage, even as we continue, or you continue to build out that process, even on the building level, we have so many amazing teachers that are leading this work in so many different ways. So I really just appreciate that your team has thought about that, and I look forward to seeing what other experts within our district that can contribute to the Treasurer's Department. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you. We're going to go ahead and go into Item 8, the first on our Board Matters agenda, is our monitoring report for our interim goal 1.3, which is second grade reading. Board members, you received the report. It's also in your binder this evening, as well as on board docs. The first thing we need to do is approve the report, or accept the report, I guess, before we can start the monitoring session. Remember that the questions in this approval are, does it clearly show what is being monitored? Does it clearly show data for the 3 previous reporting periods? Does it clearly show the target reporting period? Does it clearly show the superintendent's evaluation and performance? Does it clearly show supporting documentation that evidences the superintendent's evaluation? And if the district is not on target, or the superintendent's evaluation indicates implementation is not on track, does the monitoring report clearly describe any needed next steps? In light of all of those questions, is there a motion to go ahead and
So moved,
accept?
Madam President.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes? Vice President Vera?
Yes.
President Adair?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and turn it back over to the superintendent as well as Dr. Brown, who's joined us at the table, to hear a presentation before we begin the session.
Thank you. Dr. Brown will be beginning our presentation, and then I will close us out.
Seems like we're having a little bit of technical difficulty. There we go. So while we're resolving that, good evening. It's always a pleasure to come before the board and the community to present on the progress of our students. This is the interim goal 1.3, which is tied to second grade reading proficiency or growth. I just want to remind everyone that this ties to the board's first goal, which is strengthening reading proficiency. That goal was stated as the percentage of third grade students proficient in reading on the Ohio State Test, or the OST as it's commonly known, will increase from 43%, or a decline in the benchmark due to COVID in the school year of 2018-2019, to 55% in June of 2026. We set a group of interim goals that act as a ladder up to that third grade goal. Because we all know that third grade reading doesn't happen overnight. It's a product of what happens in pre-K, kindergarten, first, second grade. And we set goals for kindergarten, first, and second grade to be able to monitor students' progress as they move towards third grade. And we adjusted the calendar for reporting on this goal because this, like our 11th grade goal, is the one that's closest to the final goal. We're looking at our second graders. They've got about a year and a half left to be able to meet that third grade goal. And so we adjusted and brought this goal forward so we could talk about it while we still have time to intervene and do things differently. So this goal, again, the interim goal allows us to monitor the progress of the cohort as they move from kindergarten all the way through third grade, or preschool through third grade. And each year that goal, that target has to raise because that third grade goal goes up every single year. So last year, the target was 39%. We wanted 39% of our second grade students to either be reading at grade level or to have met or exceeded stretch growth. We focus on stretch growth because stretch growth is a reflection of about a year and a half's worth of learning for a student. And so if students are able to make a year and a half's worth of learning and they can accumulate that over time, they close gaps and they move to proficiency over time. So we want to acknowledge that movement, that learning, because growth in that case is the most accurate reflection of learning for us, and so we monitor that. So last year it was 39%, this year it's 46%. So it's quite a steep climb. We went from 39 to 46, a 7 percentage point increase. Last year at this time, 30.7% of our second graders met this goal. That was off track and it was well below our target. This year, 40.3% of our second graders met this goal. This is an improvement of 9.6 percentage points, almost a double-digit gain from last year. This, however, is still off track and below target, but we're closer. We're much closer to our target than we were in the past. And with that, Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. As Dr. Brown mentioned, you can see in this slide the chart which shows the progress. So again, from this time last year to this year, there has been, our students have shown a 9% increase, shown improvement year over year, with our current second graders outperforming second graders at this same time last academic school year. And our current second graders have also shown a significant improvement from where they ended their first grade year, which is about 13 percentage points. So despite the fact that the target rose by 7 percentage points, our second graders are closer to the goal this year in comparison to last year. And not only did we see improvements and growth overall, every student group showed improvement from last year. Every student group. There was no exception. Despite the increase in the target expectation, many student groups are closer to the expected final goal as well. And you can see the progress for each student group, the change from last year, as well as the percent of current year goal, their progress towards the current year goal. So now we'll talk about our strategies. We've shared the data, where we are at this point, the progress from last year in terms of meeting the goal for this interim goal. There are 2 theories of action. One, if we improve attendance, there will be an increase in student learning reflected in both improved growth as well as achievement. And our second theory of action, if students have access to the district-adopted common curriculum with its appropriate tiered supports, provided with fidelity, growth will be accelerated and achievement will increase. So let's take a look at attendance. Our current second graders have improved attendance rates in comparison to their peers last year. Our schools have reduced the rate of severe chronic absenteeism by 6.8 percentage points this year, and satisfactory attendance rates, which is greater than 95% attendance, has increased by 6 percentage points. We attribute this to a strategy that we have outlined to focus on attendance, a district-wide strategy to focus on attendance. You are aware of our Stay in the Game partnership with the Columbus Crew. This is an attendance awareness campaign that was initiated this year and certainly has supported our attendance efforts. The focus on reducing chronic absenteeism has been integrated into school improvement plans for certainly the elementary schools, which we are focusing on for this particular goal, but also in all of our school improvement plans, K through 12. In addition, the PBIS work at every school, we have a PBIS team, and they develop a site-specific plan to support PBIS, and attendance is incorporated into those strategies. Certainly, as we move forward, we will be launching an attendance manual to support all of our schools across the district, K through 12, so we can make sure that we have aligned efforts. And we'll be building staff capacity to take a data-driven approach to tiered supports for attendance, which is in alignment to our MTSS work, and is also a board guardrail. Theory of action number 2, curriculum implementation. This really speaks to, for me, an equity proposition, ensuring that all of our students across the district, K through 12, have access to common curriculum, district-adopted resources that is on grade level. And so these are high-quality resources. We're going to talk just a little bit about the investments that we have made as a district in the last couple of years and where we are in that district-adopted curriculum adoption timeline. Again, ensuring that we are shoring up the core, meaning all of our students, Tier 1 instruction, are provided with opportunities to have access to grade-level content and curriculum so that they will be familiar with the standards and have access to high-quality resources. Our curriculum implementation, the curriculum team has certainly worked to revamp our literacy block. This is a 120-minute literacy block for all of our elementary classrooms. This literacy block includes 90 minutes of whole group instruction that focuses on phonemic awareness, phonics, our core resource, which is Houghton Mifflin, and vocabulary instruction. A component of that 120-minute literacy block also includes centers that may also include whole group instruction, but this is also an opportunity for students to have student-led practice to support with all of the areas of the literacy block. And all of these components are certainly informed by the science of reading. So this is, again, another effort that we are making to ensure that our students have access to the quality of instruction that they need to become better readers as a part of literacy, our literacy block. So we mentioned before our curriculum implementation. This journey for us began in 2020. The 2020-21 school year, that was our activation year. That's when we made the district-wide adoption and investment in Houghton Mifflin Harcourt resources. We provided training to all of our teachers at that time, and that's when we began the training for foundations training and resources for our K-1 teachers. Also want to note that when we made that huge district-wide adoption, that we were, that was during the pandemic, so we were participating in remote learning. So it certainly has taken us a little bit longer to really socialize and implement that investment, given that it was launched during the pandemic. In 2021-2022, that was last school year, we began full implementation of the district-adopted ELA curriculum, and then we began providing training to our second grade teachers on foundations, and training for K-2 teachers in our resource called Hegarty, which teaches our students phonemic awareness. And then this is the first year, last year was the first year where we began the letters training for our teachers, which stands for Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling, which is essentially, it teaches our teachers the science of reading. This is not a resource, this teaches them how to teach reading. And then 2022-2023, that is this school year, this is our refinement year. So we talked about, we introduced the new core resource in 2020. We started providing some professional development, and this year we're actually providing job embedded on-the-job coaching and support for our teachers to implement the core instructional resource, HMH. We're expanding the foundations training now to grade 3 for this year, and then continuing with the letters training. And for next school year, sneak preview, we will be focusing on implementing all of these resources with fidelity and continuing with the letters training. And in the 2024-2025 school year, we expect to see the full impact of these major investments over the last 5 years to come full circle, because all of the resources, the teachers will be provided with professional development and coaching on all of these resources as we launch into the 2024-2025 year. We'll no longer be introducing them and learning them. We will be implementing those resources with fidelity. So just this slide really shows that a district-wide curriculum adoption is not a one-time investment. It is a journey, and it happens over time. It takes time to really adopt, not only just adopt the resources, but really implement the resources with fidelity to provide the teachers with the time needed for coaching, professional development, and training. This slide really shows the components of our literacy program that are informed by the science of reading and intentionally target each of the core skills necessary for students to become successful readers. Our second grade students made their largest gains in phonics, which was 10 percentage points, phonological awareness, 8 percentage points, and high frequency words, which was 7 percentage points. There were also additional gains that were made in vocabulary and comprehension. So this just knows these are the key components that every student needs to master in order to become a proficient reader. And this is what the teachers are receiving training on, the science of reading, the letters training. And so these areas, as a result of our focus on providing our teachers with the resources to support instruction in these areas, our students are making progress in those areas. And in addition to, we talked about the 120-minute literacy block. In addition to that, we have an intervention block. So one of our board guardrails is to support interventions, that MTSS process. We have incorporated an additional 30-minute literacy block, a 30-minute intervention block to support the needs of students in Tier 2 and Tier 3. In most cases, this is individualized instruction, additional support with phonics, phonemic awareness, small group instruction, and as a part of this, our iReady resources is another resource that we use during this Tier 2 support. We have increased the time on task within the recommended range of 30 to 49 minutes, and we're also seeing passage rates for those lessons remain pretty high with 86% passage rate. Curriculum implementation moving forward, certainly as you saw on the slide that showed the timeline, we are in the third year of a phased implementation of a district-wide adopted curriculum. Next year, we'll continue to provide the remaining training for the letters curriculum for elementary teachers, and having implemented and provided training for all components of the district-adopted curriculum, the full impact of the curriculum will begin to be measurable in 24-25. And closing out, we always end the monitoring report with reflecting and thinking about the ways in which the board can continue to support this work. Certainly, we have a couple of items that we've listed here, which include championing our current attendance campaign for all stakeholders, championing the importance of early literacy with our parents and partner organizations, working to ensure that our guardrails are adequately funded, and staying the course and allowing time for our schools and system to deepen our practices, particularly in the area of early literacy. We've talked about curriculum adoption, MTSS, the science of reading. These are all major shifts or changes for our organization that certainly take time. And President Adair, this concludes our report for the monitoring report, and at this time we'll entertain any questions.
Okay, so board members, we're going to use the same structure we did last time. So we're going to give ourselves no more than an hour. I'm not going to monitor the form of your questions, but we are going to monitor content. We will keep a parking lot list of questions to ensure that all questions are addressed, but some might not be appropriate for the table tonight. So I'll go ahead and open the floor to members of the board with questions. Who would like to start?
Madam President, and it's not, are we going out of the traditional order of the who, what, why?
Yeah, I'm not going to monitor the form of the question, so feel free to ask anything. You know, it's the point, as you know, the point of the monitoring session is to understand why we are where we are and evaluate whether the strategies and the theories and actions that were presented tonight are going to get us to our goal.
Thank you. I have a quick question then.
Go ahead.
First and foremost, thank you all for this presentation. I love the fact that we are showing exponential gains, particularly in the readiness of our second graders towards the third grade reading guarantee piece. So this is awesome data so far. My question is when we look at the percentage, the targeted percentages that we're trying to reach, what do they represent on the state report card assessment? What do they represent? So what does a 55% represent on the state report card?
So when we set these goals, again, we were acknowledging both whether or not students are reading on grade level, which is the closest representation of the state report card, but we also wanted to incentivize growth because we know so many of our students are behind, and if they make stretch growth, then eventually they're going to close those gaps. And when we're looking K1, 2, 3, again, a year and a half, a year and a half, a year and a half, all of a sudden we can close 2 years of gap in that window of time if we maintain stretch growth. The honest answer is, well, when we put these together, we put together a trajectory off of data that was mixed both pre-pandemic and pandemic data. We're now around to post-pandemic, and we're seeing a new sort of baseline to what that means. So last year, our students made exceptional growth. Our third graders came in at 33.5% proficient. This year, our target for third grade is 35.8, I think, for our third graders. We look like we're pretty close to being on track to hitting that target this year. That being said, last year at this time, we were saying, hey, this goal, our pre-goal was way below where we expected us to be. Put another year in, I think we should revisit those targets because they may be a little high.
Okay, so again, and I thank you for setting the context for that. I think it puts into context, in some instances, what my question really is about. But my question is about the outcome aspect of it. In alignment with a state grade report card of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where does 55%, our targeted goal, where does that put us in terms of a state appropriated grade?
Oh,
So for example,
you're asking about the third grade report card.
Yes, sir.
The state does not assign a grade or a star.
They don't do that anymore. They
Not for
assign
third-
a number. Now don't we get stars or numbers or something like that?
They assign stars for overall achievement, which encompasses every test students take. So that overall number, the performance index number, is based on reading, math, science, and all the end-of-course assessments in high school. So for the system as a whole, it takes into account every test we take. The third grade reading is only one piece of that. There is no separate
Break it.
Yeah,
So there's no disaggregated approach to this at all?
no, there's no individual star rating for any grade by subject piece of that.
Or even enclave like ESL, that there's no separation of that looks at, where the state looks at that from a disaggregated kind of standpoint?
That loosely gets wrapped into gap closure. And we also see that when we start looking at growth and growth measures. And again, part of why we emphasize growth so much, because it shows up in so many places on the report card.
Thank you for that clarity.
Vice President Vera.
Thank you. In regards on page 4, we talked about the growth, it was just wonderful. I didn't really hear what we attributed to that growth. Are you able to speak more if there was a specific strategy or something we tracked that really quantifies, like how did we reach that 7% growth?
Are you referring to which? You
On
said
page 4.
Slide 4?
Yes.
Okay, so the growth that we are seeing in literacy is again specific to the strategies that we're implementing. We are ensuring, again, research-based practices that really speak to the quality of instruction that should happen for literacy for our earliest readers. And so all of those components of reading, those are the resources that we have invested in over the last couple of years to make sure that all of our students across the district have access to those evidence-based resources as well as strategies to ensure that all of the key components of reading, they have access to the resources, and that's what their instruction, we make sure that that's aligned.
Okay. So I guess, and thank you, Dr. Chapman. I guess what I'm trying to, I guess my second part of that then is when we look at individual building needs as it relates to those resources. You know, part of what I'm trying to understand with all the resources and what we've invested in, are we really looking at on a building level which one of those resources are actually effective in those spaces? Like, I know we have all of this, you know, these investments we've made, but I guess I still am missing, like, what specific, do we know what specific resources or what specific strategies have been working in these buildings, or is it just kind of like a generalized, like, we know these are the resources we've been using, but there's nothing building specific as it relates to this monitoring?
So I would say the goal, the way that the goal is written is a district-wide goal for all students. And so the strategy is district-wide for all students. As it relates to specific buildings, all of our buildings have specific goals to meet this early literacy goal. So for example, as a district, we have set our third grade reading goal to reach 55% by 2026, right? So each school has a specific goal by year. If their baseline is here, they have a specific goal for each year so that that school will make the movement that they need to make to help us as a district reach this goal by 2026. So for the monitoring report, this is our district-wide data. We're sharing district-wide data, district-wide goal, district-wide strategies, but each school in the district, 78 elementary schools, have individual targets that they need to reach so that they can continue to show progress. We do not treat all of our schools equal. They're all starting at different places, so some of them have to make more gains. We certainly want them to not only meet the goal, but also exceed the goals. So we set those goals with each school. And then each school is responsible for developing a school-specific school improvement plan. And if you'll recall, last year I shared that once our goals for the board were finalized, then we began to transition every school improvement plan across the district to be in alignment with those goals. So that was the first time that we had that opportunity, because I think last school year the goals were finalized after the school improvement plans. So now we're in a really good place system-wide where every school is developing a school improvement plan with their building leadership team that is aligned to our board goals. And so early literacy, that's a component for all of our elementary schools. And so their strategies, may choose a particular strategy to really double down on. So when we think about the components of reading, one school may say, well, we've analyzed our results. Our scores are lower in the area of vocabulary. We're gonna spend more time on vocabulary. We're gonna provide professional development on vocabulary. We're gonna go deep in this area. Our scores are really strong in phonics. Or we need to provide more attention to phonemic awareness. We're going to ask one of our coaches to provide site-based PD on phonemic awareness so that we can improve in this area. So there's overall literacy achievement, but then we also look at the components of reading that need to be addressed, not only for the district, but also the school. Then you break that down by grade level, and then I would say that all of our teachers are experts in knowing what I call the literacy address for each one of their students. They know where they are strong, what areas of strength they have, and areas of weakness, and they can develop individualized plans to make sure that they are providing the instruction that they need so that they can be successful. Our Tier 2 intervention that iReady, that program provides an individual learning pathway for each student. So my name is Angela, I'm in 2nd grade. I take the iReady assessment at the beginning of the year. It identifies what my strengths and weaknesses are as a 2nd grader, and then each time that I log into iReady, I'm accessing an individualized pathway that's providing me with extra practice and skills and lessons on the areas in reading, the bigger umbrella, that I need support with. And then I have progress checks. And then remember when I said our students are spending the 30 minutes in intervention time on the iReady resource, but they're also passing those iReady lessons at an 86% passage rate. So not only are they going through the lessons and accessing the materials, but they're also demonstrating mastery of the content in that Tier 2 intervention. So you have Tier 1 intervention, what all students receive, and then you also have a Tier 2 intervention, which is an individualized pathway for each student. That's what the iReady platform provides, another opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Chapman. And in regards to a theory of action and improving attendance, part of what I wanted to understand with that is, I know chronic absenteeism is a big part of that, and I guess I want to know is, how are we going about tracking why our students are absent? What exactly are we, if we are tracking that information? And then essentially, are there any other strategies? So I know we have the campaigns, the calls, the letters, but I guess for me, I'm trying to understand how are we really addressing absenteeism if we don't know why they're absent? Is it transportation? Is it a health reason? And how are we quantifying why they're absent, I guess is what I'm trying to understand.
So when we think about attendance, this is, again, a holistic approach to looking at attendance. Prior to us starting this journey of a district-wide strategy to focus on attendance, we were really, all of our strategies were reactive. They were after the students had accumulated 10 or more absences. Then we would engage in notifying the parents, having these team meetings, but it was too late. And so our district-wide strategy to focus on attendance is all proactive. What are we doing before school even starts? No one has missed a day yet. What are we doing in the summer? We're looking at the data of attendance from the previous year and said, last school year, you missed 10 or more days. We're gonna reach out to you over the summertime to make sure that we are getting ahead of any attendance patterns for the upcoming school year. As a part of attendance, we're making sure that there's awareness. Families know how many days their child has been absent. As a parent in the district, I receive a text message that tells me, direct text message, your child has missed 2 days of school this year. So we're working to inform our parents so that they know how many days that their student has been absent. As it relates to the why, so every absence is coded, there are attendance codes, but majority of those absences are unexcused, meaning the coding requires us to either the parents to notify us why the child was absent, or for us to enter a code for the absence. So for example, if a student is absent because they're sick, then how do we know that? The parent writes a note or informs the school by email that the child was sick. If a student is absent or tardy, let's say for a number of different reasons, how do we know that? Once we receive that information, we code it. And so in addition to once we know how the students or why the students are absent, the team work together. Every school has an attendance team, and so the team works together to provide case management and support to really mitigate the barriers or anything that's interfering with why the students are not coming to school. Okay. And again, this is all proactive before a student gets to chronically absent. Remember, we already had checks and balances in place for truant students and attendance procedures, but we're wanting to intervene and put all of our efforts on the front end before our students even get to accumulate 10 or more absences.
Thank you. And then my final question is in regards to the literacy block on pages 11, or slide 11 and slide 14. How are we going to ensure that our special education and our ESL students are in fact going to get this level of instruction? I'm excited to see, the 90-minute breakdown, but when we talk about kids that, need very specific ways of instruction, how are we going to go about tracking to make sure that they are in fact receiving the breakdown of what you just described?
So this, what's laid out on slide number 11, the literacy block, this is core instruction for all students. All students should be receiving all of these components of the literacy block. There's no exceptions to that. So some of the services, if students qualify for specialized services, that would be in addition to, or they would be pushing in and supporting this work. So for example, perhaps during small group instruction, that would be a great time to meet with students to provide them with intervention if it's specific to their IEP or services, the second language services. But in an ideal world, we're working to move toward a more inclusive co-teaching model that ensures that there's greater increased collaboration between the classroom teacher and special ed.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate you highlighting that, because that is something, you know, as a mother of a kid who's in special education, there often seems to be a disconnect between what he is receiving in small group, and then when he gets back into the classroom, it's something different. And so I appreciate you explaining that, because I do want to make sure that all of our kids are really getting these opportunities in the way that you've described them this evening. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pierce.
Thank you for this report, Dr. Chapman and Dr. Brown. So not taking away from the gains that our students have made, we still have quite a bit of growth that we need to make to hit this goal. And so I have a number of questions that will hopefully get at how do we need to make those gains and get there in somewhat of a deeper level. So my first question is, given what we know about curriculum implementation, what are we learning from our teaching staff about the appropriateness of our current goal?
The appropriateness of our board goal?
Yes, this goal. Are our teachers responding to say, we need to change it? We know that anything is feasible. Are they voicing concern about the feasibility of this goal? What are our teachers saying about this goal?
So I have not received any feedback specifically about the board goal, the rigor of the goal, or level setting of the goal. I know that as a district, as an organization, as educators, we have always looked to our state report card as being the bar, right? And so what I appreciate, and I know that what we appreciate as a district, is that the board is not only looking at proficiency, but the board is also looking at growth over time. And the interim guardrails, which we're monitoring tonight, our second grade goal, which would not be reflected on a report card, but this is leading up to that third grade proficiency, which is a high stakes accountability for everyone across the state, our students and our staff. So I would say that, again, we have not received any feedback from teachers specifically on the board goals or this interim guardrail, but I mean, you know, it's a nice ladder that leads us to looking at that high stakes accountability, which is very visible for stakeholders and educators, teachers, principals, everyone.
So the scaffolding is there to take place to get us to achieving that goal. You're confident that this is still an appropriate level in terms of the goal? Yes, but I think that, you know, now that we have a new baseline. Remember, when we established these goals, it was during the pandemic. And so we didn't have a baseline. And so I think as a board, collectively, we committed to revisiting those goals once we established a new baseline to see if they're still relevant and make sense for now that we are post-pandemic. Okay. This question kind of connects with what Vice President Vera was getting at earlier in terms of the attendance. What is impacting attendance? Have we given any thought to how we will merge our plans for social, emotional, culture, climate to support the fidelity or the implementation of the curriculum with fidelity?
Are you asking the interplay between the guardrails?
You could say the interplay between the guardrails.
Can you repeat the question, Dr. Pierce?
So I appreciate the fact that you all talked about implementing our curriculum with fidelity.
Yes.
One of the challenges that we're seeing is attendance. And there's a number of factors that might influence attendance, which Vice President Vera got at. As we think about those factors, culture and climate might be one of them, social emotional might be another one. Are we giving any thought or consideration to how that might interplay, using President Adair's term, might interplay with the implementation of our curriculum?
I would say yes. That question is layered. So I want to think about, first I want everyone to know, as our schools are working on their school improvement plan, attendance is one factor that they're looking at. So our principals are looking at data from multiple sources. I mentioned in the budget presentation, we talked about the Panorama Survey. That is a survey that we, again, are basing each school, so they have a culture and climate goal. And so they look at the school-specific data for their Panorama Survey and decide which area of this Panorama Survey, based on feedback from their teachers, their parents, and their students, which one of these areas do we need to focus on or prioritize? And then they develop site-specific strategies to help close that gap or improve the perceptions of their students, their staff, and their families. So that Panorama Survey is another data point. Again, I certainly believe that, when students are actively engaged, they have a sense of connectedness, a sense of belonging to their school community. It's the same for adults. You have a sense of belonging to your workplace, then you want to be there. And then you want to be engaged, you want to be actively involved. And so I would say that looking at the sense of belonging and that sense of connectedness on those Panorama surveys really gives us an indicator of the work that we need to do to help build those relationships and connect our students to our schools in more deeper and meaningful ways. There was another question I think you asked about social emotional learning and the implementation of our curriculum. So as an educator, I have always felt the need to prioritize social emotional learning. If you think about the demands of the curriculum, the expectations that we set for our students, they're pretty high. And one of the things that we've learned post-pandemic, coming out of a pandemic, when our students returned to our schools, they showed us and told us loud and clear that they needed more supports. We needed those relationships that they had with teachers and staff were fractured because of the disruption. And so as they returned to us, it was very clear to us that we needed to focus more in providing the social emotional learning and supports so that all of our students can be successful, they can be actively engaged, and they can be ready to embrace and lean into all of these resources that we have supported. So for me, it's not an either or, it's a both and. How do we think about social emotional learning and all of the curriculum investments that we are making to support our students? Right now we're talking about early literacy, but really K through 12.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate you acknowledging that it's a both and responding to that layered question. Given that response, are you anticipating, is your team anticipating that we will need to make some budget allocations differently this upcoming academic year, that maybe we will need to approach our ordering cycle for different curriculums and materials differently as a board to support the implementation of the curriculums?
Not at this time. We have certainly given a lot of thought to the budget for the upcoming school year.
But one of the things that we have mentioned in a previous monitoring report was a need to partner with CASEL to support our district with coming up with a district-wide framework for social emotional learning so that we can ensure that the practices that we're implementing, the strategies that we're suggesting to show the connectedness to our curriculum and resources across the district, and social emotional, so we can prioritize social emotional learning for our students and our adults. That was a need, and so we're still in the process of formalizing that partnership and working on that district-wide framework. So that was something that we had mentioned in a previous monitoring report as a strategy that we recommend, and that's a work in progress.
It'll be forthcoming?
Yes.
Soon? Okay.
Yes.
Next question then. How will we support the theory of action specifically related to attendance during the summer, given what we've learned from this data? Particularly, I'm interested in the severe and moderate absence for students.
So one of those strategies is very simple, Dr. Pierce. It is outreach and engagement. So we already know the students who are chronically absent or have severe chronic absenteeism. One of the strategies that's suggested or recommended by Attendance Works, which is one of the national partners for leading district-wide strategies to support attendance, is outreach and engagement over the summer. And so making sure that our schools are printing the list, looking at the students that are incoming and saying, looking at last year's data, how many students were chronically absent or truant, and then making those phone calls, connecting with families, making sure that they understand that they have a relationship between the home and school, and they have a trusted partner at the school who's going to stay in contact with them. We have also partnered with Everyday Labs, who are also sending messages to families, direct targeted messages to families. So it is, again, a concerted effort from our attendance teams and our staff to make the outreach necessary so that families can stay engaged even over the summer. And then there's also a plan before the student comes back to school the next year. So this is proactive work so that we're looking back at the patterns of behavior for attendance and making sure that we intervene early so that those patterns do not repeat themselves in the next school year.
Just additionally, are we encouraging those students to attend the summer experience? Are they getting early enrollment? Are we saving seats for them?
Absolutely. So all of our schools are working on, they have targeted lists for enrollment for summer school. So there are certain students, I call them our VIP students. We want to make sure we save a seat for them in our summer programming. But specifically for our elementary students, we certainly want them to be attending our summer experience, which will certainly help them, again, continue to stay focused on all of the resources that they need so that they can be successful in the next grade.
Last question, and this is because we have the calendar on our agenda today to approve the academic calendars. As we think about the opportunity to deepen the practices for the implementation of our curriculum, and we think about how some of our community members respond to the number of professional development days that we have, are those days appropriately allocated? Do you anticipate our teachers needing more time to learn the curriculum, especially for this particular population of students?
So it's a delicate balance, right? As parents, we don't want to lose that instructional time. As teachers, we don't want to lose that instructional time. But, you know, as a district, we have made some significant investments in curricular resources. Those are resources that we don't just drop in the classroom and say to our colleagues, figure it out. We say, we're going to make sure that you have the professional development that is needed so that you can really feel confident and competent in implementing these new resources. And so I do believe that there was one additional day added for professional development in the next calendar for for the next school year. But that was a need that was driven by, again, all of the resources that we talked about, that district-wide curriculum adoption over the next 5 years, again, spending time connecting the investments that we've made as a district to our board goals. It takes time to socialize that work. It takes time for our teams to get together and really unpack those resources and learn together. So we certainly want to make sure that we have the time allocated to do that work well. If we had more time, that would be amazing. So I'm not going to say that we don't need more time, but it's not just the professional development days. We also have time built into the district calendar at the school level where there's staff meetings, there's the teacher-based teams that meet regularly, there's the building leadership teams that are meeting, and some staff members and schools have created additional opportunities above and beyond the PD days. So some schools earmark 3 or 4 days in the summer to do a retreat. We're going to do a deep dive on vocabulary, and we're going to spend some time talking about vocabulary. So there are ways that schools can adapt and customize the schedule to make sure that it meets their needs and go above and beyond what we've allocated district-wide.
Thank you very much.
Back to Board Member Cole.
I'm actually okay. I think my question had been answered.
Okay. I just want to kind of come back to something Dr. Pierce started, and just to make sure, 'cause looking at the achievement or growth chart, so we, it's great. These second graders have started a whole 10 points ahead of where our second graders were last year, so our current third graders. So that's great news. We're closer to our goal. We saw that last year's second graders, this year's third graders, saw a little bit of a backslide. So I kind of, again, re-asking, I think Dr. Pierce's, one of her first questions, are we confident that we are going to continue to reach this goal and continue to see this type of growth? Also understanding that our reading curriculum is going to be fully implemented in the next 2 years. Mm-hmm.
I've been told to speak more loudly for the folks in the back. So I want to reiterate something I said early on to Board Member Cole, which is that these interims were established using data that included pre-pandemic data as well as pandemic data. And we knew that we might have to come back and revisit them. If anything, I think they may be a bit ambitious. Our students last year, yes, they saw a little bit of a decline towards the end of the year, but right now they're looking like they're going to come in pretty close to our third grade reading goal. So we saw a substantial gain. We see this upward trend for 2 years in a row. I think that's very promising. I think, again, it indicates that we're moving in the right direction. We're beginning to see a consolidation of practice. We saw an increase in fidelity. We saw an increase in attendance. We're beginning to build a little traction on this. I do think we may need to revisit this trajectory because it is quite steep. It's very steep. And knowing that we're post-pandemic, we get this year behind us, and we have a little bit better sense of the relationship post-pandemic between what we're seeing and our third grade outcome. We may have to attenuate this downward a little bit. And we could see that for first grade and kindergarten as well. But again, we knew coming into this, we were sort of dealing with apples and oranges. We had pre-pandemic, we had pandemic data, and now we're around to the rest of the fruit salad now that we're in the post sort of endemic era of this, where we're back in person. As we begin to continue to provide instruction in a more consistent fashion, same curriculum, in person, same testing conditions over time, then I think our sense of the reliability of the connection of the data, we become, at least I become more confident in that relationship over time because things are stable. And the changes that we see then, we know we can begin to parse out a little bit better. But again, 2 years in a row, upward trend, closed the gap substantially this year. These kids are further ahead than they were when they ended first grade. Mm-hmm. So not only are they doing better than last year's second grade, they're doing better than they were at the end of their own first grade year. So that business of additive growth is stacking up for them. So, again, I am confident that we're moving in the right direction at this point. The question is, are the goals a little high? Possibly, but, truthfully, when we set them, we wanted to set them high because we want to hit third grade.
So,
Dr. Pierce is dying to ask something.
I'm going to ask Christina's question again then. How do we know that it's these theories of action that are showing this type of growth? Or is it just the fact we're back at school, things are kind of getting more normal, where we are starting to implement with fidelity the things that we've done? How do we know that it's these theories of action and not the whole other list of things that Dr. Chapman just spoke about?
I can take a swing at this from my point of view.
And I'll follow up.
Okay. So it's difficult under a circumstance like this. I often hear the board ask cause and effect questions. And it's awfully hard for researchers to answer cause and effect questions in situations when there are multiple things that are being implemented at one time. What we do know, certainly coming back to in-person instruction was helpful. We do know that increasing fidelity of our implementation around iReady was important. We know that that's connected to research that says that, hey, if kids do this, they're going to show gains in growth. We see that. So there's a connection there that, hey, if you do this with fidelity, you're going to see growth. We see growth. Okay. We know that it's very important to implement Tier 1 instruction. When you're changing a curriculum, you often will see a dip initially when you change a curriculum, and the change for a curriculum intervention often takes 3 to 5 years. So we're not seeing that dip. We're instead seeing an upward movement. And there are a lot of resources that are intentionally aligned to try to help with the fidelity of the implementation of that curriculum. These are the types of things I would look for to explain a change. And you see many of those pieces there that support that. There's been a long-standing challenge here with chronic absenteeism. We're beginning to see a corner turned on that. Devoid of any other explanation, our intentional effort to raise awareness and begin to intervene in a proactive way seems like a logical explanation. And of course, that work around chronic absenteeism is absolutely critically aligned to school climate. And I think the superintendent painted that out very clearly.
Dr. Brown, can you go back to slide 11? So when we looked at the elements of the literacy block, all of these areas, these are the key areas of literacy instruction that are key for our early learners. We can actually see the progress and the growth that they are making over time in these key areas. So I think that was on a later slide where it showed in phonics. There's significant increases in phonics. There's significant increases in vocabulary. This slide. It shows that our students are making progress in these areas. These are all the components of reading. Our students have to make progress in these areas in order to be able to really access the third grade reading OST, right? So if they don't have a strong awareness, these are the foundational skills. If they don't have a strong awareness of phonics and phonemic awareness, vocabulary, they're going to struggle. And so what we're finding is that we are, again, intentionally aligning the resources and then measuring our progress along the way. Our students are becoming stronger readers. K through 2, they're learning how to read. And then once they get to third grade, and beyond, they are using the reading to learn, right? So they should become independent readers. Without these skills, they will not become independent readers. And because we have not made significant investments in these areas before, we did not have a strong phonics program like Foundations and Hegarty, we have students in the later grades that are missing these skills right now.
That's a gap we have to close. And we have closed that gap by making an investment in the resources and investing in our teachers and providing them with professional development. And again, we're going to have stronger readers. They're going to be stronger in literacy and the foundational skills, and we won't have to close that gap later on because we're being very intentional about how we spend our time and our resources.
Dr. Pearson, Board Member Cole.
So, Dr. Brown, I appreciate you indicating that there's opportunity to go back and to reassess where the goal currently is. As we are approaching, so if you go back to slide 5, and you see that our mid-year point in 2018-2019 was at 43.6. We're approaching that. We're getting close to that. As we continue to get closer to that point and converge, I would really love input from our teachers, because my question would be, are we stressing teachers and students as they try to achieve this goal that we've set? And again, these goals are feasible, but given what we know about attendance, given what we know about the implementation of our curriculum, given what we know just about the culture and climate in our buildings and our classrooms, is this goal creating additional stressors on our staff and our students?
I don't think that was a question, but
yeah. A request as we converge.
All right, Board Member Cole.
I'm going to try this without making a request. I want to be in fidelity with our model here. Can we go back to the previous slide that showed those key indicators, the phonics, No, that is.
Yep, one more.
Right there. Okay, so my question is, are these the specific tactics that we're looking, that each individual school is leveraging to build those competencies in the kids for reading?
Yes, these are the foundational literacy skills that all of our teachers are working to reinforce and support daily in instruction.
And is it then that our regional superintendents would have a deeper understanding of where our schools are in their particular regions with regards to this?
Yes, so for example, our principals, the iReady platform, this data is pulled from our iReady platform.
Mm-hmm.
The iReady platform provides us, it has a robust data dashboard that includes reports for parents, teachers, principals, our area superintendents, and the district. And so the data can be disaggregated in a variety of formats so that the end user, no matter whether you're the student, parent, teacher, principal, principal supervisor, you can look at the data and run a report and see the bright spots as well as the opportunities for growth.
Okay. So if I'm looking at this data, I can say in the vocabulary space where we have seen a 4% increase overall throughout the entire district with second graders. We've seen a 4% increase, but that still demonstrates when we're talking about building towards not just the 55%, but beyond. That then shows, and help me with my math, that is a 70 some odd percent, what is it, 77 some odd percent gap. How do I look at the gap aspect of that?
So for all of these areas, it shows that the students have improved from the previous administration of the assessment, but there's still more room for improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And so I almost see this as a ladder. The stronger our students are in phonological awareness, high frequency words, phonics, and vocabulary, the stronger they will be on comprehension. That's like, so The top 4 categories are the discrete skills that the students need to know, the foundational skills. They need those skills in order to be able to comprehend. So phonics is the sounds that the letters make, putting all that all together when they can pronounce the words and it makes meaning and they don't have to spend too much time trying to figure out what the word is, then they can move on from words to phrases to sentences to paragraphs and then develop real meaning from the passages and the literature that they're reading. So ideally, you want to be really strong in all of those areas in order to improve. That's how you improve. That's the ladder that you need to go through as a reader, beginning reader, to get to that comprehension stage.
Understood. I'm still not sure about the gap aspect of it, of our lack of being closer to 55 and beyond percentage of students capable of academic capability in these spaces.
I think the 55% that you're referring to is not in these specific areas.
No, it is not.
It's on iReady. It's on the benchmark assessment, not in these individual areas. These are discrete skills. So the goal is not for us to be at 55% in any of these areas. Certainly the goal is for individual students to be at 100% in these areas, because these are the foundational skills that they need. So they need all of these skills to be able to perform on the benchmark assessment and the state assessment. So the goal is to shore all of this up.
Thank you. That's what I'm trying to get to in my Columbo kind of way. I'm asking, when I'm looking at aspirationally what we want to see for every child in this district who's a second grader taking iReady and demonstrating progress and growth, that we're actually able to see that these students are closing that gap towards 100% as opposed to just the 55% for third grade, that we're closing towards the 100%.
Yes.
And as I look down at vocabulary, comprehension, the lower 4, that's where or the lower 3, excuse me, that's where I'm concerned. That's all. Just what steps are we taking to close that gap? Back to that question from Vice President Vera, that it helps to know what the idea of what we're doing specifically to ensure that we're making those gains and distributing those best practices throughout the schools. So if a regional superintendent can say, oh yeah, in Region 3, we were doing this, this, and this. Now, we're able to get that because we heard it from regional superintendent of Region 3. In addition to that, somebody else actually can say, oh wow, okay, yeah, we can try and leverage those tactics and those targets and tactics the same way. That's what I'm trying to understand and just get to.
Okay, I think we're getting a little bit
and forgive me
through
if I'm getting off track here.
Good conversation, and this data was new to us. This looking at this chart, so I think it's sparking our brains going. Do you have something?
Yeah, just really quickly. On slide 9, part of one of the theories of action, or one of the contributors to that, is our PBIS work. And I guess my question is, how many of our schools are actually using PBIS, or elementary specific?
All of our schools are
All
implementing PBIS.
Okay. And so at what point will we be able to see kind of that PBIS data? Because I want to understand how the PBIS work is directly connected to our attendance theory of action.
I believe the PBIS data is one of the indicators for one of our guardrails, so that should be coming up in one of our monitoring reports for one of the guardrails.
Thank you.
Dr. Pierce, did you have something else?
Yeah, I just have a clarifying question. And I think just to give our community, so Dr. Chapman, this is just a clarifying question to help our community understand, I think, the importance of with this data, what your presentation is showing us. Slide 13, can we go back to slide 13? Throughout this presentation, you all have discussed the importance of our students getting that phonics awareness, the high word frequency, through curriculum. How are you thinking about replicating that for our grades and first kindergarten pre-K?
So these same strategies are being implemented K through 2. So when we do our next monitoring report and we look at the next grade level, first grade and kindergarten, you will see certainly the data will be different because there's different progress and growth that the students are making for the different grade level, but you will see the same strategies. So all of our teachers, this is our early literacy goal, so these are early literacy strategies. But again, the data will be different, the intensity will be different for different groups based on the data. I want you all to know that as we are talking about this at the board table, these are the universal supports, district-wide strategies. We certainly, as we're looking at specific schools based on our data, we may have to increase the intensity of the intervention. We may have to accelerate the progress at one particular school. So when we're looking at that data for a specific school or groups of schools, if the data is glaring and it shows us that we need to pivot, we need to do less or more, we're certainly able to do that, and we are responsive to looking at the data in real time to making sure that we're providing those supports, whether it's an individual school, a group of schools, whether by region, by neighborhood, whatever it is, we're making sure that we're responsive to that.
I'm so used to it. Reyes.
Thank you, Dr. Chapman. I think this is a little combination of a lot of different questions. When we looked at, we have this whole practice of trauma-informed practices and how we do our work now. I just went through a training where they talked about a lot of times this would be considered supervision, right? So how do we get from supervision to support, right? So you talked about it might get more intensive in some areas than others. So that can heighten that trauma as we're monitoring. I don't know if we talked about any strategies of engagement from our community members or partners on going kind of back to what Board Member Cole said, or somebody said about supporting our staff, supporting our students. What are our strategies to get others to help get our kids there so that we can decrease a little bit of the trauma that might, now before you were telling me I needed a 20, now I need a 30. So I didn't see any of that discussed.
So we have one of our district-wide partners, so we can talk about the partnership with the United Way. We have partnered with them to implement a strategy called Success by Third Grade. And so they are working in 2 of our regions, Region 1 and Region 3, to provide additional supports inside the classroom, outside of the classroom, to support with our early literacy goals. We talked earlier today about City Year is one of the partners that we're working with. I think maybe 1 or 2 of the schools are elementary schools, and they actually start at 3rd grade. They typically don't work with students below 3rd grade, but they're working with certainly 3rd graders in those elementary schools to support our early literacy goal. So I think that as we are continuing to really identify what the needs are, I would imagine that additional partnerships to support with early literacy supports, early literacy intervention, early literacy tutoring, expanding extended learning opportunities during the school year, whether it's after school or Saturday school, but providing those additional supports, that would be another area that we would be looking for partners to support us.
And I appreciate partners. I guess, a couple years ago we did the super readers or the weekend, I forget what that was called, where we engaged actually the community and community organizations outside of the United Way. So it could be an NAACP, it could be the Hispanic Chamber, it could be any of those other partners. And it seemed to have made some differences and we got some gains. So a lot of times as board members, as a district, we get individuals that come and say, how can I help? We may have an opportunity, to create some sort of
Absolutely.
engagement plan.
So Dr. Hartman, it's a great question.
I told you it was going to be real.
It's okay. But I think actually, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about the theories of action.
Yep.
So Ramona just brought up a completely different theory of action, and we talked about this in the budget, right? We're investing in those three,
500K.
a lot of money in those three partners in particular. You mentioned some right now, but none of that work shows up in the theories of action as present.
Because
So if her
those
point is
resources
valid-
were not for this early literacy goal, that was for our graduation goal, a separate board goal.
Right, but I think she's talking about, could these kind of partnerships be used in this goal?
The partnerships that we mentioned, that we highlighted in the budget presentation, those organizations target older students, not for the early literacy.
Kind of like Big Brothers, Big Sisters. I'm talking about all these other partners that we allow come into our schools. But I mean, just a parent, just any organization.
So I made us go further down the hole, but my point was.
But inclusive of those.
The point is, it goes back to, she brought up some strategies that we used in early literacy before that had community engagement, right, that you just were discussing. But that is not one of the theories of action that we have chosen to put in this monitoring report. So while it might be happening and might have impact, it's not one that we're monitoring. And so that's kind of my struggle with this, just to be my personal struggle about what's in the report and not in the report for theories of action when we are doing a lot of things.
I think I just want to highlight that the strategies that we just discussed, they are not district-wide strategies operating in 78 elementary schools. They are site-specific, and they are happening in a few schools. Again, our goal is a district-wide goal, and so we're lifting up, what I'm sharing with you at this table are strategies that I can say are happening in every elementary school, hands down, no matter which day you go into the school. These are strategies that have been socialized in every school, strategies that teachers have been provided with professional development at every school. So that's all of our K through 2 teachers, or K through 3 teachers across the entire district. There are some partnerships that are working at one specific school, 2 schools, city years at a few schools, communities and schools at a few schools, but does not get to 78 schools. And so we're not highlighting that as a district-wide strategy because it's more site-specific. So that's why that's not highlighted here. But I will say that I think that the direction that I would love for us to go in as we're thinking about our early literacy goal. When we originally wrote, remember we developed our strategic plan before we finalized our goals. Now we are clear that we have this early literacy goal. We are clear as a district, remain committed to this early literacy goal. I would like to push us to a place that we work with our community and our partners to develop a plan as a community. This isn't early literacy for a certain group of students. This is early literacy for the entire community. How do we work together to develop a plan to support the early literacy development over time? It includes social emotional supports. It's a holistic approach. It includes our partners, after school programming, weekend programming, connecting the work that we're doing with all of our partners. But it's really an intentional focus where we all come together and say, how can we, all hands on deck, support this goal as a city, as a community, knowing that this is a priority, not just for our district, but for our community. And so I think that, for me, would be a next step, so how we name and honor the work of our partners and community, and we can do this work together.
Thank you. We're past our time, so that was a good monitoring session. We kind of got off, sorry, my fault, that was good information. and next steps. So I don't, if anybody has any comments, we're supposed to do the self-evaluation. I'm not going to go through all the little boxes, but if anybody has any comments about things that we could improve or where you thought, you know, how we did tonight. Ashley is, we don't have Zoom today, but she has been watching us, and so she's going to be providing us feedback tomorrow by email on the session. So I don't know if anyone has any comments. Go ahead, Dr. Pierce.
So I think this was a good monitoring session. I appreciate our administration actually thinking more deeply about the theory of action beyond attendance. I think our board was able to really dig deep in terms of kind of how we can support you all in terms of reevaluating, reassessing the goal and where it's at, how it's impacting our staff and our students. I think as we continue to have these monitoring sessions where we just kind of went to with the last question from Board Member Reyes, really around kind of when the data is showing us something, and this slide is really telling us that our students need to learn phonics, right? And we have to champion that for our community, for our families. The more they learn phonics and high frequency words, the better they'll comprehend, they'll catch on to that vocabulary. Is for us to think about kind of how we can monitor ourselves and say, how have we talked to our colleagues outside of the district who are working at these nonprofits, who are in other positions of influence to help partner and do this work with us. So with that being said, just for us to think about how we can move from simply monitoring our administration to also monitoring ourselves and taking on some of the accountability to help create these partnerships. So again, I appreciated today's session. Thank you.
Anyone else, any thoughts? I think those are really important points, Dr. Pierce. I thought that overall we did pretty well. I thought we all did really well focusing on the data and actually talking about what was in the report. I didn't have to parking lot many questions, which was good. And I think, again, we're all learning and growing in this, and we're all doing better at it. And, you know, the point of these, again, is for the board to evaluate, you know, understand where we are and evaluate the strategies that are being put forth to us to ensure that the growth that we expect is happening, and we are seeing growth. So I'm very proud of the work that the entire team is doing, all of the teachers and all the kids and everybody. It takes everybody. So, you know, 10 points is nothing to, you know, put your nose up at. So great job, everybody. And we'll just keep on going. Okay, so that will end our monitoring report. Let's go ahead and move into item 8.2, which is the academic calendar. We're going to have Chief Counsel Barnes come up for a short presentation, maybe, or answer a question. Presentation? Yeah.
Bless you.
Good evening. We're here today to again talk about the 2023, 2024, and the 2024 and 25 school calendars. If you recall, about 1.5 months ago, I proposed the calendars to the board. We discussed the various items regarding the calendar and had some discussion. And today, the sole objective is for the board to consider and vote on the calendars. Now, if you recall, also, on February 7th, We talked about the requirement of the district to negotiate the calendar with CCA through collective bargaining. We also talked about the minimum number of hours required by the state for our various grade bands, 910 for kindergarten through grade 6 and 1,001 hours for grades 7 through 12. We also talked a little bit about the length of the school day, which is also required to be negotiated with the union. What is not on the screen, and I believe we talked about it a little on February 7th, were the number of hours that we currently have for instruction hours this year. And for high school, that's 1,030 hours. For middle school, 1,019 hours. For elementary school, 996 hours. Of course, for the upcoming school years, we don't know the precise numbers because the daily schedules are usually not completed until May. We also had during the February 7th meeting some discussion about the hours. And there was some discussion about I believe one speaker talked about the number of instructional hours. And again, part of there was some discussion between Dr. Pierce, I believe, and Dr. Chapman during the earlier monitoring report regarding the balance that we have to have, instruction days versus professional development days. And pursuant to the contract, we are required to have professional development days. We don't have professional development days solely because of the contract. We have it so that we can teach our teachers how to teach. And this year, we had 8 professional development days. For the next 2 calendar years, that number will go to 9 for the very reasons that Dr. Chapman mentioned earlier. So, again, in putting together the calendar, we had an internal group, a cross-functional group, that group being our Office of Curriculum and Instruction, Student Services Office, Communications and Engagement, Talent Management, and the Office of General Counsel. We also collaborated with CEA as required by the contract. CEA also distributed a teacher survey to its membership. CEA took that survey into consideration as they were negotiating with us. The district has also provided a survey to families. And the results of that survey was distributed to the board members. And as you can see through the results and comments, I think the comments are more important than the actual statistical data. Well, in fact, the statistical data is, one might say that it's, and I'm pausing because I can't say that word for some reason. Statistical data, the number, one might say that it's meaningless because of the number of responses. And that's because the teacher surveys was relatively small considering its membership, and the responses to our family survey were minimal considering the number of families that we have. But the comments were consistent. And again, they did go to the number of instructional days. Again, we need that balance. And that's definitely one item that we need to consider during the next negotiation cycle, the number of instructional days. Some of the other comments that were made, I believe a board member mentioned holidays. We are tied to a particular holiday through a contractual agreement with CSEA. And again, that's something that would need to be negotiated. And that's something that we certainly can do. So these are, the next few slides are copies of the calendars, color-coded, that you already have. I'm not going to go into much depth with those. You have them. They are in your board docs. They are available to the public. Here's a chart that talks about the teachers' report day, students' report day, last day of school for both students and teachers, and the various breaks. Professional days, as I indicated earlier, those were increased from 8 to 9. Record days remained the same. 23-24 year-round calendar. 24-25 calendar. Again, the same chart as the traditional calendar. The different breaks, start and last day of school. And that was rather brief because we had already gone over it on February 7th. But I will entertain any questions that you may have regarding what went into the calendars. The goal today is for the board to consider and vote the calendars out.
Do we need a motion first before we discuss? Yes. So there is a resolution that we have, so we need a motion to approve the resolution, which I'll turn over to Dr. Pierce, who has the text for it, and then we will answer do questions.
I motion to approve Resolution 8.2, the resolution to adopt our 2023, 2024, and 2024-2025 academic calendars.
It's been a motion. Is there a second?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Or second, I'm sorry. Second.
Motion, second. Now, are there any questions, comments for the group or for General Counsel? I do want to say that the survey results have been published so anyone can view the feedback that we did receive from our parents and families. All right, hearing.
I just think in general, I'll just make the comment that as we move to approve the academic calendar, it will be great for us to also think about our athletic calendar for the next 2 years so our families are also able to plan accordingly.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
Vice President Vera?
Yes.
President Adair?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Our next 3 items deal with legislation, the State House legislation, different aspects of that. So 8.3, we have a resolution recommending an amendment to the Ohio School Board Association's legislative platform. This is a first reading. I will turn it over to Board Member Cole, but I will acknowledge that we had several board members who have been working on this, so I will open it to any of those members as well. Board Member Cole.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm not going to read through the entire resolution. What I want to do is at least just kind of level set with the fact that we are members of OSBA. In our membership of OSBA, OSBA is our advocate on a state level and even to some extent on a national, to advocate on the best behalf of public schools throughout the state of Ohio. With that, I will start with the fourth whereas clause of data in here. Whereas the 65th OSBA Delegate Assembly adopted the 2021 OSBA legislative platform that added a racism equity plank to the students and learning section of that platform. So in essence, what this resolution is designed to do is protect those protected clauses, not only acknowledged by the state and also acknowledged by federal government, but also acknowledged by this Board of Education, where we go above and beyond and further identify protected classes of students and staff. Second, whereas the plank addresses the racial and socioeconomic inequalities and specifically addresses creating an inclusive environment no matter a student's race, ethnicity, or socioeconomic background. And you'll have to forgive me for my messy reading because it's kind of dark in here. I don't want to look too crazy shining my light on the page. With that, whereas the Columbus City School Board policies go further. Oh, thank you. Okay, I'll just go ahead and do it. Lord have mercy. This is 50, y'all. Okay. Columbus City School Board policies go further, stating it will enforce its prohibition against the discriminatory harassment based on race, color, national origin, sex, including several sexual orientation and transgender identity, disability, age, religion, military status, ancestry, genetic information, collectively protected classes, or any other legally protected category. Now let me go to the last, therefore be it resolved. Okay. Therefore be it resolved, the language in the OSBA, the language in the OSBA opposes legislation section includes the following highlighted changes. And we are in support of these changes. OSB opposes legislation that limits resources or opportunities for students of color and those who are traditionally underserved based on their race, ethnicity, color, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, age, religion, military status, ancestry, genetic information, and any other legally protected category or socioeconomic background. With that, Madam President, I motion that this resolution be accepted.
Okay, it's just a first reading unless we want to waive second.
I motion to waive second reading.
Well, I was going to have Board Member Brown talk first, but now I don't know what to do.
Did he have something to add to it? Did you
Parliamentarian. Do I have to do his motion?
He wants to make comments.
I know, but you motioned for.
His motion was first, so you need to resolve that motion.
Okay.
Okay. So then, essentially, you got a motion on the table.
So is his motion to then?
I can withdraw it for dialogue.
Do that.
Okay, so withdrawn.
So now the next motion would be Board Member Pierce's motion on the table, which is to waive the second reading, which now requires a second.
Okay, is there a second to waive the second reading?
Second.
Okay, so now we have to vote on that.
Or without objection, you can proceed.
Okay, so without objection, we will waive the second reading. Now we can have
the motion.
No, then we got to go back to the motion, right?
Back to the motion.
To actually approve it, because this is, all right, so.
That's what I'm about to do. Yeah.
No, but then we have to do motion,
Move
second,
and
then comments. Okay, I know.
We're
Motion,
good. So motion to approve the resolution.
now comments. Board Member Brown.
Thank you. I think this is important. It's important because of the manner in which OSBA does its lobbying. OSBA is made up of a wide variety, over 600 school districts. And many issues are divide school districts on various sides. And as a result, they've got a practice that unless an item is in the legislative platform that has been adopted by the delegate assembly, that they will not lobby officially on that matter. This particular item is one that is very important, and while I am confident in saying that there should be no controversy whatsoever on these matters, the reality is otherwise. And on a previous occasion when OSBA had a chance to expand, and that's what we're talking about doing here, expanding the plank from race and equity to include equitable protection for all students, they failed to do that. And this motion is to take another shot at expanding protections to cover all of these areas, just as we do in Columbus City Schools. And I think that it's very important. I had good help from around the state in putting this together, and a number of other districts are pursuing this. Michael will be our delegate to the delegate assembly when this is heard in the fall, but we've learned recently, in the last few years, that unless we engage this process early before the deadline for submission, that we won't be able to get heard at the delegate assembly later. So I'm happy to second this and make sure that we do everything possible to expand protections to everyone.
Thank you. Other comments?
I just want to clarify just a couple of things for our community. And so beyond, while lobbying is important, this resolution protects students and expands the identities that are acknowledged, defined as protected classes. In past delegations, the classes that were not included related to gender expression, specifically for our transgendered students. And we know that all of our students are important and valued here within the district, but we do need to join our colleagues throughout the state to advocate for all of our students, no matter what identities they have, because we know individuals have multiple identities and there's interplay between those identities. And so as Central Region President of our OSBA region, I applaud us for putting this piece of legislation together to advocate on behalf of all the students in the state of Ohio as it relates to protected classes and identities.
Thank you. Other comments? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ms. Reyes? Yes. Vice President Vera?
Yes.
President Adair?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We have a second resolution, 8.4, resolution to properly fund public education. I'm going to turn this over to Board Member Brown.
Thank you. Thank you. Just as the 8.3 resolution has been discussed around the state by a number of school districts and school board members, there's been an effort statewide to adopt a resolution for school districts to adopt a resolution that deals with school funding in a comprehensive way. There are many legislative challenges facing us, and it's perhaps worse than it's been in many years. There are great opportunities, and we want to be able to support the good opportunities as well as to help direct and state our views opposing other kinds of things. The resolution is pretty straightforward. It's entitled Resolution to Express Our View that we want to fulfill Ohio's constitutional mandate to fund a thorough and efficient public school system. And it's just that simple. Because there are a number of bills pending, this comments on those bills that directly affect the funding. For example, this deals with the Fair School Funding Plan that was finally initiated a few years back and has to be fully phased in. The legislature seems willing to phase it in, but they want to go back and use 2018 data for input instead of using up-to-date data, and this encourages them to do otherwise. This resolution also takes a strong position opposing both House Bill 11 and Senate Bill 11 and any funding program, voucher, educational savings account, or other plan that has the effect of diverting public tax dollars from public schools to private parochial schools, and that's important. There is a concerted effort by many in the legislature and others around the state to expand and increase the voucher programs to have dollars go with students from us into these other kinds of schools, non-public schools, and it's contrary to the Constitution because states required to prioritize and fund us, not the others, and because it hurts public education. Vouchers hurt Ohio. House Bill 1 is another bill that is discussed in this resolution at length, and this is a bill that would create what the legislature is calling a property tax relief program. The reality is that it wants to shift the tax burden to school districts, to local communities, and away from those who are wealthier and more affluent. And it's a bad idea. I am hoping that it goes nowhere, but I view House Bill 1 as an existential problem for public education in Ohio, that if it were to pass, we would decline rapidly. And then finally, we generally ask the Ohio General Assembly and the governor to commit to fully fund the Fair School Funding Plan. This is the Cupp-Patterson bill that was worked out in a huge compromise and after a lot of work, but to fully fund that plan as it was initially recommended, including current inputs and conducting the proposed study to determine the cost of educating economically disadvantaged students, which has been dropped. So with that, I would move passage of this resolution.
I second.
So this is for,
And,
I did it again.
and
So
I was going to turn to Chair Cole as chair of the Finance Committee to,
So it's only first reading, so we just messed up again.
Again.
So can you just withdraw all that, and then we can do it, we can do the motion to waive the.
Okay.
Motion to
Then I withdraw
Friendly
my
withdrawals.
motion.
I motion to waive the second reading.
Okay, there's been a motion to waive the second reading. Is there a second?
Second.
Without objection, it is waived. Now do your.
Now, I move that we adopt this resolution to express our support to fulfill Ohio's constitutional mandate to fund a thorough and efficient public school system.
There's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, now discussion.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to say in short that what our current legislature is attempting to do is unnecessarily shift burden financially further to a community, to local communities, to unfairly carry a tax burden that should be fairly distributed between commerce and the community. It must be fairly distributed. They've already passed legislation that has further shifted economic burden to local communities. And this is not necessarily about urban school districts. This is about the 600 plus school districts throughout the state of Ohio who, knowingly or unknowingly, whether they believe in small business or big business, are bearing the greater tax share burden of funding public education, and it's still an underfunded model. It is still an underfunded model. It does not answer the question that the Ohio Supreme Court mandated for it to answer fairly on behalf of the citizens, residents, and children of the state of Ohio. So that's why I am in vehement support of this legislation, so that we as a board, and appreciate the support of you all as a board, to take a strong stance to our legislature on behalf of not just Columbus City schools, but all of the public schools in the state of Ohio.
Dr. Pierce?
I would just add that it's also important for our community and stakeholders to really pay attention to the governor's proposed budget and how it will impact not only our district, but public education in the state of Ohio.
90% of Ohio's children are educated in public schools.
That's right.
90%. We still do not have a funding formula or funding mechanism in Ohio that adequately supports those students. Yet our legislature and those leaders are intent on moving that money to support private and non-charter school, non-public schools. We have to fund the 90% before we can even talk about the others. And it's not about choice. Parents absolutely have a choice in where they send their children. And we at CCS want to be that choice, and that's why we're working really hard to show our community and really improve our student outcomes. But when we talk about funding, and we talk about, on one hand, we have the funding formula, and then we have the governor's budget, and then we have the backpack bill, and then we have, it all adds up, and we all need to be paying attention to it. So I want to commend my colleagues and those other colleagues around the state who are putting these resolutions together to demonstrate the story, the full story, the full impact, tying in all of it into resolutions like this so that the community can really understand what's happening in downtown Columbus in the State House right now. And this is just the funding piece is just one of the things we're going to talk in a second about, some other things that we talked about that are not in particular about funding, but kind of are as well. So I definitely support this. I think, again, my colleagues, thank you very much for the efforts that you did to put this together and helping us advocate to be strong advocates for our students and public education students across the state. Other comments? All right, please call the roll.
Vice President Vera?
Yes.
President Adair?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item 8.5 is just a general legislative update. We want to do that more. As you just heard, we kind of had a discussion the last about finance. There's a lot more going on. And so we want to make sure the community is understanding, because we say public education is under attack, but we don't always tell you why that is. And so we want to try to do a better job as your leaders educating you about what is going on. So today, several of us attended, including some of our staff, attended the OSBA Legislative Conference, where we heard from the governor, we heard from our leaders in the House and the Senate, and we heard from those on the Education Committee. And then there was opportunity to go and meet and speak with legislators as well. Luckily, we live here in the capital city, so we get to go down all the time to see them. And so we have a lot of great access here as the as the capital city school district. But I wanted to give an opportunity for some of my colleagues to share some of the other pieces of legislation and some of the work that we are doing, not just around school funding, but Dr. Pierce brought up the budget. There's a lot of other pieces in that budget around career tech, around wellness dollars. There's also around school resource officers. We have, of course, the backpack bill, which was talked about in the funding that we just spoke about. We have several different types of the vouchers. We also have Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 12, which are the restructures of the Ohio's State School Board, as well as the Department of Education, which we have already sent testimony in opposing. And then we have some things that we brought up, and I know I'm going to ask Vice President Vera to talk a little bit about House Bill 110, which was from the last General Assembly, but still very applicable to us and things that we are working on. But again, it's really important that our community understands the impact that is happening by these policy decisions that are being made about us, with us not necessarily always being represented. And so we are trying very hard to ensure that our voices are heard, and that's part of amending the legislative platform with the OSBA. That's part of us going and doing more advocacy down at the State House and building those relationships. And we ask you to do that as well. Because your voices and your stories really are what will help make this change. And our legislators ask that too. They say, where are the people? What's the story? What's the impact? So we ask you to do that too. If you hear something, write letters, not just to us, write to the people making these decisions. So I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to let my colleagues who attended the conference with me share some thoughts about other pieces of legislation, or just other things that you would like to talk about in this space. We're going to make this a more formal part of our agenda with a little bit more formal reports later. But today, since we attended the conference, I just wanted to have an open dialogue. So I'll start with Vice President Vera.
Thank you, President Adair. As President Adair mentioned, I think a big part of what we want to do as, your continued servants in this capacity is advocate for what our students need. And, House Bill 110 is legislation that was approved back in June of 2021, and it's a transportation penalty. So the Ohio Department of Education, is fining our district and other districts up into almost $160,000 per day as it relates to, if we are late 30 minutes or any kind of prolonged non-compliance in terms of picking up students. And as we know, it is not just a Columbus City Schools issue, this is a national issue. And not only are we providing transportation for, well over 30,000 of our own students, but also looking at the charter non-public schools we also provide transportation for. So House Bill 110 is something that we as a district need to continue to advocate for our students, penalizing us by taking funds away from transportation when that's how our kids get to school and what we're all trying to work towards is not the solution. And so being able to have opportunities to go down and to provide testimony, having families provide testimony, essentially our district is working really hard in collaboration with other districts against House Bill 110, but it is something that we need to continue to look at ways to advocate for our district, advocate for our transportation department. Finding us is not the solution, and that's something that I was able just to get some additional, at least pose the question and finding out what our partners around the state are doing, and I was happy to hear that there is more conversation around House Bill 110, but I think that we as a district need to continue to push that forward and really advocating to make sure that this funding is not taken away from our district and certainly not taken away from our students.
Thank you for that. One more piece about that is remember that we are in litigation over it. And that's important. Another, we're using all of our vehicles that we have as a district to ensure that we are maintaining our funds. And so just remember that as well. We're just tying things together to demonstrate how we continue to fight for every dollar that we have for our students. Another thing in this current cycle that they didn't reallocate was the money for the replacement buses. And so that money is not in the budget right now. And so that's something they brought up in the conference today about how we need to really be thinking about that. And, you know, we need to be advocating to get that money back in. And so that's something that I didn't know about today, but I learned today. So we need to kind of put that on our radar as well. Are there any other board members that would like to share some thoughts about the experience today at the legislative conference, or talk about a piece of legislation that we haven't yet? Rob.
Sure. I thought it was a very good legislative conference, and the number one thing that impressed me was not only that there was a very strong sold-out turnout of school board members from all over the state and staff from various school districts, but the fact that not only was the governor there in person to address us, but the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate were there in person to address us. And I think that's impressive. It means that we've got their attention and they're thinking about us. I'm not sure entirely what the message is, and you know, I could be cynical very easily, but the reality is that they were there, and they were there to show us that they were listening. And you know, how these things will all shake out in this General Assembly remains to be seen. But I think you know, it was noteworthy. And a number of our Franklin County, Columbus City School District representatives and senators were also present and engaged in conversation about some of these bills in ways that we need some help, and hopefully some of our relationships and some of our communities' advocacy will help us get there. One other item that I hadn't focused on but heard about today in the governor's budget proposal was the funding of SROs. And there's a proposal in the governor's budget to provide at least funding for one SRO per school building. I asked the question, and I got an answer that I really didn't care for. And that is, for those of us who no longer use SROs, we've got our own security department. Are we going to have access to the same level of funding? And the immediate answer was no. It's something that we can work on. I don't know if it's going to happen, but it would be nice to get that to happen, so that you know, other school districts also work without SROs. They may have other arrangements with their local law enforcement, but they too are going to be left out unless they actually go with formally designated SROs. We decided for a number of good reasons that we would move on from that. And so that I thought was noteworthy. There are a few bills pending in the legislature that are positive and that we can support, and that's also good news.
That's true. We should talk about those too, to have people make sure that those bills go through. So we'll do that next time.
Great.
Very true. All right. Well, thank you all for that. Let's go ahead and move into item 9, which is our consent agenda. This evening, our consent agenda consists of items 10.1 to 25.9. Are there any items a board member would like to pull for separate consideration? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve our consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on any items?
13.4.
I'm sorry, 13.
13.4, I think that is related to
Approval of out-of-state
approval of out-of-state
and
travel.
overnight
So this particular resolution focuses on particular schools. Want to lift up that there are a number of our schools that are sponsoring trips to our HBCUs. But we also have individual students that are interested in visiting those schools as well. And so just for our community members, our stakeholders, if you get an email or an invitation from an individual student needing support, needing a donation to help them on those tours, please consider giving that donation. Not all of our students attend the schools that are taking the official visit, but we do know that we have a number of students that are interested in attending those tours.
I mean, that's just an issue of equity. Why couldn't we just do a district tour?
We used to have some of our partners and churches would sponsor those, and we still may have that happening. So
yeah, good point. Any other
Brother
items?
Cole might have something to say to that.
Yeah, so, because I did some inquiry into this too. You know, some of that heavy lifting has been done in support of boosters. I know as of recent, there are still, you know, churches, members of our faith community that are in support of trying to raise dollars. One specific school is Linda McKinley, where folks have stepped in to make individual donations for, you know, sponsoring a specific student. But I would like us to, as we move forward, really think of identifying some ways in which we can set aside dollars for students for these particular reasons. I know my sister colleague here is working diligently with some other members to create a foundation, and quite possibly, and we've discussed this in the past, but quite possibly that might be an opportunity for our students. But I'd like us to very seriously, where we can plausibly do so, figure out how we set aside dollars, if that's the right terminology to use, to provide for our students and maintain our other important operations at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Other items anyone would like to discuss? Seeing none, please call the roll.
President Adair?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Dr. Pierce?
Yes, with the exception of 13.8, 23.1, and 23.2, of which I abstain.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
Vice President Vera?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We have no speakers for non-agenda items. We have no executive sessions. The last item on our agenda is a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
And a motion is your second. Motion is second.